Hello and welcome to video 3 of module 2, the 2 keys to unlock the minor arcana. Now, if you know me well and how I teach tarot, I love to make things simple. So that is what this video is all about. All you need to do is learn these 2 keys and it will give you so much insight into the 40 cards of the minor arcana. And instead of having to remember 40 different tarot card meanings, all you need to do is learn these 2 particular systems, and you can marry them up and it will unlock so much of this part of the tarot deck. So let's get straight into it. So here are these 2 fundamental and easy to learn systems that lie behind the minor arcana. So on the one hand, we have the suits of the minor arcana, and the suits link to the elements, and those elements right there are fire, water, air and earth. And once we get to understand the kind of properties or the meanings around those 4 elements, we get to understand the suits and we get to understand those 4 groupings of the minor arcana cards. Now, the other layer or the other key to the minor arcana cards is the numerology. So in those 40 minor arcana cards, they go from an ace, which is a 1, all the way through to 10. And so if you simply learn the numerology or the basic meanings of those numbers of 1 through to 10, then you get a new layer of understanding with the minor arcana cards. And then imagine you just marry up the number and the element or the suit, and you start to get a really good sense of what that tarot card means. Now, is this the only way of reading the minor arcana cards? No. We will be layering up some different ways of looking at those cards, but this gives you such a good grounding to really understand the cards, from that sort of base level point. All right, so let me start to get into the elements and the suits. So let's begin with cups. Now, cups relate to the element of water. And just step back for a moment and just think about water and what role it plays in our life. I get so fascinated by water. We were walking down in Tasmania in the Cradle Mountain, the national park there. It's like an amazing, amazing place, absolutely beautiful. We were, of course, surrounded by water, not just because there were a lot of rivers, but because it was raining a lot. And, it was really interesting meditation in what role does water play. So we had kind of like, you get kind of the misty rain. You're like, oh, this is not too bad. And then it starts to get a bit heavier, and then you start to feel like, okay, there's a bit more sort of weight and power behind this water. And, after many days of, the rain falling, we were walking across some of the rivers and they were like torrents. They were huge. And I was looking at that force of the water. And when there's a lot of water and a lot of movement, think of that water and how powerful it is. In fact, I even just saw on the television a little while ago that water can cut through, if it's like really focused water, it can cut through very dense materials, so rock or concrete or so on. Quite amazing, because if you look at, here's my here's my water bottle. You look at that and think, well, that's quite, it's kind of it doesn't look like it's very powerful. You put your hand in water and it kind of just moves around. But when it's a lot of it, it can have a lot of force and impact. And then even on this walk, I was like looking at the bushes and the plants and just seeing these tiny little beautiful water drops and how, sort of dainty that they were and how small and precious that they were. So this all got me thinking about water and what role does it play? What is its symbolism in our lives? And I think the amazing thing with water is it's so kind of receptive. It's fluid. It's moving around. It has great power to it, but it is also a very, in some ways it can be quite a passive, element. And it really links into, for me, the feminine energy. you know, women, or if I shouldn't just say women, because I'm talking about feminine energy, which is in all of us. So feminine energy can be, you know, very powerful, but also quite receptive and quite flowy and balanced, and so on. It's not about dominating or, you know, exerting control and so on, but it's about sort of being in flow. So what does all this have to do with tarot cards? Okay, let's bring it back. So water and cups are linked. Now, the cups cards are all about relationships, and, you know, think about it, how we in flow with each other. It's about emotions and feelings. You've got to think about like how your emotions kind of flow from one into the other, and so on. It can be about, you know, intuition, creativity as well. So I want you to kind of connect in with that concept of water and cups, and that will give you a flavour for, you know, what do the cups cards represent in the tarot. Don't worry, we're going to do a little bit more of this in terms of activities in the workbook soon. Okay, let's now talk about wands. Now, wands relate to fire. And fire, let's have a think about fire. Oh, wow. You know, you just look at the fire and you can just feel this heat and this warmth and, you know, a lot of power in fire. Think of, say, a small contained campfire, or even just a candle, a burning little tea light, a nice little flame. And, you know, even just how mesmerizing that is, to a huge bushfire, for example, that can create huge destruction, but also growth. You know, think about what happens after a bushfire. All this new growth comes through. So let's relate that back to the suit of wands, which is about fire. It's kind of that passion, that motivation, energy. It can also be about spirituality and our belief systems and so on. And our opinions. And yeah, inspiration, it kind of like a bit of a seed to something that will grow into something much bigger as well. Okay, let's now talk about pentacles. Now, pentacles cards relate to the element of earth. Now just think about earth and, you know, just even imagine yourself lying on the grass, giving a tree a cuddle, you know, putting your hands in the dirt, and how like grounded that feels. And so you feel so planted in and contained and safe and secure. Now that also relates to the Pentacles cards, because the Pentacles cards can talk about security, safety, also things that are in the material realm. So whether that might be money, work, finances, career, the things that we can feel and we can touch. The Pentacles cards are also about the physical realm. You know, if you say seeing Pentacles cards in a relationship, it can often be about the physical connection between two people. It's very grounding as well. You know, again, think about the earth and how grounding that is. So the Pentacles cards can be very, very grounding. And then finally we have swords. Now swords relate to air. Again, have a think about what air does in the world around you. You know, we breathe it. Air, like I'm sitting here in this room and I don't really notice the air. Well, actually I've got my heater on here and that's keeping me warm. But we just sort of breathe in that air. But if I was to go outside, I'm seeing that there's a little bit of a breeze out there, and that breeze can start to generate a little bit more energy. And think of like a gale, like how, you know, how strong that can be. It can rip roofs off houses. So again, this concept of power that goes behind air. Now, in the tarot world, with air relating to swords, the swords relate to the thoughts, the mind, the communication, often like verbal communication. It can also relate to power and, you know, authority, particularly if you think of the idea of the sword itself. And in the tarot, we often see swords with the double edge, and you can see that here with the Ace of Swords. It has a double edge. those swords can carry a lot of power that can sometimes be damaging, just like the wind can be damaging, but can also be very constructive. Again, think about air and wind power, right? So the wind can be used in quite positive ways, just as the swords can be used in positive ways. So when we think about swords, we're thinking about the thoughts and the intellect. We're thinking about the rational mind. And of course, we are thinking about it. Truth and facts. So swords is often related to information and, the cold, hard truths and so on. And finally, power and authority and how that is expressed. And, the power associated with, say, the swords is quite different to the power associated with the cups cards. Think about power of words versus power of feelings or relationships and how that sort of contrasts. I find that the power associated with swords can often be quite domineering or controlling in a way. Okay, so here's your activity number 2, and you're going to find this, have a look in your workbook for module 2, and you'll see activity number 2. And I want you to experience the elements, just as I've shared them here with you. So choose an element that you want to get to know better. It might be air, earth, water, or fire. And go and have or create an experience with it. If it's earth that you want to get to know better, go and dig your hands into the earth. Go and plant some plants. Go and hug a tree, whatever it takes. If it's water, go and sit by a lake, a river, a beach, and just observe how the water changes form and, how it's experienced in our world. With the air, go outside, feel that fresh air on your skin and feel the breeze and just think of what meaning does this have for me? And fire, burn a candle, of course, be safe, make sure that it doesn't burn the house down, and just observe the flame and how does the flame kind of dance around and what feelings do you get when you're watching that flame. So it is quite a creative exercise, but these are things that will help you deepen your understanding of the elements beyond what I could tell you what they mean. I want you to create this personal connection with those elements. All right, we're going to get into a little bit more practical activities too to help you understand the suits. Now, the different suits kind of have their own characteristics, and we can actually interpret situations in different ways by those suits. So let me explain a little bit more about that. So we have Vanessa, and Vanessa's got her first day at work. So I want you to use the suits to kind of give advice for her first day of work. So if you were giving advice from the cups, what would that look like? Maybe it's like, oh, just make sure you get to know everybody and, you get to say hello to everyone. Or maybe the pentacles might be, make sure you know what your salary is or how much money you're going to get paid. Or maybe the wands, figure out, why you're there, what energizes you about this new job. Or perhaps the swords is kind of, communication. So, make sure you've worked out how the email system works or something like that. So I want you to think through a couple of different pieces of advice that you might give to Vanessa using the suits as an example. And then similarly, we've got Rob and Kate here, and they're having a big argument. So what kind of advice would you give to them as an arguing couple who probably want to try and get things back on track? Again, use the suits just to get that feel of how do these suits come to life. And then finally, this is a little bit more of a structured way of doing things. And I've given you this tarot suit summary in your, it's in the Learning Hub so that you can download it, you can print it out, or you can do it online. And what I want you to do with the tarot suit summary is go through each of the 4 suits and start to sort of break it down. So obviously you write in what suit it is, what element it's linked to, what are some of the key words or key phrases that you might associate with that suit, what are some of the positive aspects of the suit, and what are some of the negative aspects. Because even though we might think, oh, well, the cups are so lovely and gorgeous, and they are, what's kind of the downside of being emotional, or the downside of being creative? Have a think about how that might express itself in a more of a negative way. Think about the day-to-day activities and events that are associated with that suit. And also think about personality types. You know, if someone was expressing themselves as the suit of cups, what would that look like? Maybe someone who's highly intuitive, highly emotional, who loves, you know, sharing heartfelt stories with others. And then you may also want to collect some images that are associated with that suit. And, you know, jump online, have a look at some different images, or, you know, even grab a magazine and cut out images that link you to that suit. This kind of activity is going to, again, get you really deep diving into the suits and creating that personal connection with the suits, way beyond what you'll read in a book. And you'll start to just feel it in your body and just know how it, you know, how it really comes to life. Awesome. Okay. We're now going to step into the second key for unlocking the minor arcana, and that is numerology. Now, you don't have to be a numerologist, expert, whatever. All you need to do is understand what the numbers from 1 through to 10 represent. And, you know, again, you might be thinking, oh gosh, I've got to memorize what these means. And maybe, you know, a little tiny bit of memory will not go astray in this case, but I want to kind of walk you through it in a way that hopefully makes sense for you. Because the numbers have a meaning for a reason. It's not like someone just decided, oh, that thing's going to be that, you know, because it sounds good. So let's walk through it. So one is linked to aces. And so I often think of, say, the aces as like this little seed of something that's about to grow into something amazing. And I always think about that seed in the ground. That little tiny seed has everything it needs to grow into a ginormous tree. Can you imagine? All it needs is gets a bit of, you know, sun and water and nice earth, and it starts to open and unfold and grow and grow and grow. And all from that tiny little seed. So for me, that's what ones or the aces really represent, that potential for something huge, the new beginning, opportunity, inspiration, you know, all of that good stuff. All right, so when one meets another one, we have two. What this can start to represent is a balance between things. And it can also represent relationships, partnership, even potentially a bit of a crossroad, because, you know, once you might be following one path and then another thing comes into play, and so, okay, which way forward? Now, when two become three, I often think of, say, the couple who have a baby, and two people create this, you know, new little being. So threes are often around creativity and growth, groups even, and you know, initial achievement of goals. So two can be a bit about sort of planning as well, and then three is about starting to make things happen, making things, you know, manifesting, creating. Okay, then we move on to our fours. Now, four, I often relate to a table. Okay, yes, you can have a three-legged table, got it, but a table is going to be most secure and stable when it has four legs to it. So the fours are often about stability, being grounded, certainty. What else have we got there? Structure, foundation, manifesting, growing. You know, it's kind of taking it even further from that creation of the threes into something that is, you know, even more stable. Now the fives, okay, the fives represent a midpoint between 1 and 10. They're no longer the new start, but they're not at that point of completion yet. And so the fives can often represent a point of tension and conflict because they're in this in-between state. They're neither here nor there. But they also represent change, and that things are starting to change. You know, we can be in this beautiful little safety place of the four, but in order to keep progressing, we kind of need to get out of that safety zone. And when we get out of our safety or comfort zone, that can feel a little bit funny, right? So that 5 can represent that conflict, instability, change and challenge and so on. Then we step into the 6s, and the 6s are a bit more about adjusting. And, you go through that point of, tension and change, and then you find that place where you're like, oh, okay, yeah, back into comfort a little bit more. So the 6s are associated with harmony, problem solving, cooperation, communication as well. Then the 7s, well, 7s are very spiritual in their, in their meaning. You think of 7th heaven, and often in many spiritual texts, 7 is quite a sacred number. Now, 7 can also represent reflection. You've come so far, you know that you're almost at the end, but you kind of need to look back and go, where have we come from? So it can be reflection or evaluation. It's also about discovery and knowledge. You've used your path to have an experience, and you know that you need to grab a hold of that experience to get to the finish line with the 10s. All right, 8. 8 is about mastery and apprenticeship. It's also about movement and action, so close to the 10s of completion that, it's getting very close. So we get that sort of feeling of accomplishment is on its way. The 9s, nearing completion. I often think of this like during labor, and when you're getting to 10 centimeters dilated, you're getting to that 9 and it is nearing completion. You are so close to about to have your baby, and it can be a little bit intense, but you know that you're almost there. So the 9s can have that little bit of feeling of like, a bit overwhelming sometimes, but it can also be, very positive as well. I'm thinking of, say, the 9 of Swords compared to the 9 of Cups. So the 9 of Swords is kind of like that stressing out, worrying about stuff. And then the 9 of Cups is that more feeling of happiness and contentment. I've got everything I need. And then finally, the 10s are about completing a cycle. And sometimes, again, that completion can feel wonderful and positive, but sometimes completion can feel, again, quite overwhelming and upsetting, particularly if it's something that you didn't necessarily want to have come to an end. The thing to remember with the 10s, it's that although there is completion, there's always a new beginning. There never really is kind of like finite, that's the end. Because things always are in a state of change. They're always moving into the next thing. So with that, 10 comes into the 1 as well. Okay, so I want to show you how we can bring these two together. And actually, let me just backtrack a tiny bit. I want you to think about those numbers from 1 to 10 and just think about how you might express those different numbers and what they mean for you. Because again, I can share what I see in the numbers, but I want you to own that as well, and I want you to find your connection with those numbers. All right, so activity number 5 is a practice reading, and again, this is where we bring it all together. 3 of Wands. So the question is, where's my career heading? So we've got 3 of Wands. Let's think about it. 3, what does the 3 represent? So growth. And then what does Wands represent? Well, maybe it's about inspiration and motivation. So just simply bringing those two together can give you a meaning for this tarot card. So in this case, it might be growth of inspiration, or your inspiration is growing. Now, of course, there's more to it than that. There's more to this card, even just by looking at the picture and so on. But for now, I just want you to tune into what does the number mean and what does the suit mean and how does that come together and what does that give me in terms of information about what the card means. Awesome. So go and do that activity. I want you to do it again in your own words. Don't just copy what I'm saying, because it's important that you're embodying this and learning it for yourself. And look, you might go along and start to go through your tarot deck and pull out a few other cards. Let's see what we've got. Ace of Wands here. And then you might go, oh, Ace, seed, new potential, Wands, inspiration. So maybe it's like an, new inspiration in something. Maybe then you go, oh, 3 of Pentacles, growth and work. Maybe there's some growth at work, right? So just start to play with those tarot cards and play with this new technique that you have by combining the numbers and the different suits as well. All right, so here's what's coming up next. I'm going to walk you through the suit of cups to give you a feeling for what these cards mean. But in particular, I'm going to show you how the numbers and the suits come together to bring us the meanings of the cards. All right, I'll see you then.